Astrolith was the kind of place where dreams came to die and bodies weren't always far behind. Captain Thane Valor knew it better than most, not that he'd recommend the experience. The sprawling underground city was a labyrinth of rust, smoke, and bad decisions, with a nightlife that could turn a saint into a sinner in record time. Not that Thane was any saint. He leaned against a corroded bulkhead in the Nexus Tavern, a watering hole that boasted the best synthale in this sector of the galaxy, a boast as empty as a politician's promise. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and desperation, mingling in the kind of chemical bouquet only a seasoned drunk could love. Thane took a swig of something that might have once been whiskey and surveyed his crew. There was Grizz, his hulking engineer with a face like a bulldog chewing a wasp. An unfortunate accident with a plasma cutter had left him with a permanent scowl, but he wore it well. Then there was Cody, the pilot who handled ships with the kind of finesse most people reserved for fine art. His sarcasm was as sharp as his flight skills, which was saying something. Rounding out the group was Naya, the tech specialist. If there was a digital lock to crack or a system to bypass, she was the one you'd call. Her fingers danced over interfaces with an elegance that made Thane suspect she could probably play piano if she hadn't been too busy breaking into secure data networks. "You hear the latest?" Naya asked, leaning over the table. Her voice was low, like she was afraid the walls might have ears, and in Astrolith that wasn't entirely out of the question. Cody rolled his eyes. "If it's about that idiot councilman again, I'm gonna pass. His scandals are more predictable than the sunrise." "Worse," Naya said, her eyes gleaming with the kind of mischief that usually preceded trouble. "Earth's been banned from using FTL by the Galactic Dominion." The table went silent. Even the perpetual hum of the tavern seemed to take a breath. Thane set his drink down, digesting the news. "You're joking." "Wish I was," Naya replied, her grin evaporated like a puddle in a solar storm. She tapped a data pad, projecting a hologram of the official notice. It glowed with the kind of bureaucracy that could strangle a planet's hopes with red tape. "Well, shit," Grizz muttered, scratching a patch of stubble that looked like it was staging a mutiny against his face. "We can't survive without FTL. We'd be stuck on our little blue rock, forever circling the drain," Cody snorted. "Don't you mean forever circling the sun?" Grizz shrugged. "Same difference." "Either way, we're screwed." Thane studied the holo document like it owed him money. The Dominion seal glared back at him, an emblem of intergalactic authority that he had about as much use for as a third elbow. The notice wasn't just a kick in the teeth. It was a declaration of war by other means. Without faster-than-light travel, Earth would be isolated, cut off from trade and resources. Humanity would regress faster than you could say Dark Ages. "Why the ban? What did we do this time?" Thane asked, half expecting the answer to be something ridiculous. "Apparently, some diplomat pissed in the wrong cornflakes," Naya said, scrolling through the document. "Officially, it's because of reckless use and unauthorized distribution of FTL tech. Unofficially, who knows? Maybe they just hate our guts." "Join the club," Cody said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Seems like we're not exactly the galaxy's sweetheart." "What are we gonna do about it, Cap?" Grizz asked, his voice a rumbling basso that could have belonged to a mountain rather than a man. Thane pondered that, letting the silence stretch out while the gears in his head clicked and whirred. "We find out who's really behind this. Someone's got to have something to gain from keeping us grounded." Naya grinned, the troublemaker in her eyes back in full force. "You thinking what I'm thinking? If it involves questionable moral choices and probable space combat, then yeah," Thane replied, cracking a grin of his own. Cody sighed, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward. "I suppose this means the usual. Dangerous missions, obscure leads, and a ton of people you're gonna piss off. Wouldn't be a real adventure otherwise," Thane said. "And when was the last time we had a boring day?" Grizz chuckled, low and gruff. "Can't remember. And I like it that way." The plan, such as it was simple. Thane and his crew would dig into the murky depths of galactic politics and under-the-table deals, looking for the puppet master pulling the strings on the FTL band. To do that, they'd need a lead, and Thane had just the place in mind. "Time to visit an old friend," Thane said. "Let's see if our contacts in the black market can point us in the right direction." "Oh joy," Cody drawled. "I love it when you reconnect with your charming associates. Suppose you got a better idea," Thane shot back, though the challenge in his voice was more playful than hostile. "Not really," Cody admitted. "But you know me, always the optimist." The crew gathered their gear, each checking and double-checking equipment like it was second nature. For Naya, it involved packing all manner of tech gadgets, some of which were so illegal they practically glowed with it. Grizz hefted a toolkit that looked more like a small arsenal, while Cody slid a sleek sidearm into a shoulder holster. As they made their way through the crowded main street of Astrolith, Thane couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Years of living on the edge had honed his instincts to a razor's edge, and right now they were screaming paranoia at top volume. "Anyone else feel like we're the main attraction at a freak show?" he asked, scanning the shadows for signs of company. "It's Astrolith," Naya replied, unfazed. "We're always the main attraction." They reached a nondescript storefront tucked between a cybernetic repair shop and a noodle stand that claimed its broth was almost organic. Thane pushed through the door, the bell overhead jingling with an innocence the place hadn't seen in years. Inside was a treasure trove of contraband, everything from exotic spices banned on most civilized worlds to weapons that could vaporize a small moon. Behind the counter sat Relk, a wiry, silver-haired man with a perpetual smirk and the morals of a starved hyena. "Thane Valor," Relk said, spreading his arms wide as if welcoming a prodigal son. "Heard you were dead." "Not yet," Thane replied, slipping into an easy grin. "Sorry to disappoint." Relk laughed, a sound like sandpaper on glass. "What brings you to my humble establishment?" "Need something to make your problems disappear." "Not quite," Thane said. "Actually, we're looking to make a few problems appear. Specifically, someone who knows why Earth just got locked out of FTL." Relk's smirk faded and his eyes darted around nervously. "That's a big question." "Dangerous is my middle name," Thane quipped. Relk sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You always did know how to find trouble. I might know a guy who knows a guy, but it'll cost you." Thane expected as much. In the underbelly of the galaxy, information was the ultimate currency, and Relk was as much a banker as he was a trader. "Throw in a couple of those plasma grenades," Grizz suggested, eyeing the selection behind the counter. "And a discount on whatever else we break in the process of finding this guy who knows a guy," Cody added. Relk chuckled, nodding slowly. "Deal. I'll set up a meet, but watch your backs. Anyone messing with the Dominion's business usually ends up missing pieces." "Thanks for the tip," Thane said, clapping Relk on the shoulder. "And thanks for the grenades." As the crew stepped back into the chaos of Astrolith streets, Thane felt a familiar thrill coursing through him. The kind that came with knowing you were about to jump headfirst into a storm without an umbrella. "Well, crew," he said, turning to face his friends. "Looks like we've got a date with destiny, or disaster," Naya quipped, grinning. "What's the difference?" Thane replied, leading them onward. In the distance, the lights of the city flickered like stars in fast forward, each one a reminder that time was short and there was no going back. "Let's go see what the universe has in store for us," Thane said, not bothering to hide the excitement in his voice. "And if anyone asks, we're just doing some sightseeing." The crew laughed, their voices blending with the hum of Astrolith as they moved through the maze of steel and shadows, each step taking them closer to the truth, and whatever fresh hell awaited them along the way. As Thane and his ragtag crew made their way towards the Dominion outpost nestled in the bowels of an asteroid, he couldn't help but think about how much he hated tunnels. If space was an endless expanse of freedom, then tunnels were its opposite, a claustrophobic nightmare designed by a sadist with a personal vendetta against personal space. "This place could do with a decorator," Cody quipped, stepping over a suspicious-looking puddle. Maybe someone with a fetish for drywall and fluorescent lighting. You mean a psychopath, Naya shot back, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the datapad slung around her neck, scanning the area for any digital breadcrumbs. The asteroid's surface had been as welcoming as a slap to the face, with its jagged rocks and dust clouds. Inside wasn't much better. The tunnels were a mess of twisting corridors and dead ends, each one as inviting as a funeral parlor with a special on coffins. "You sure this is the right way?" Grizz asked, his voice echoing off the walls like the grumble of a displeased god. His eyes darted around, wary of both the environment and any hidden surprises. "If it's not, I'll eat Cody's hat," Thane replied, a smirk tugging at his lips. Cody tipped his hat, an atrocious thing that looked like it had been stolen off a cowboy who'd lost a fight with a bottle of whiskey. "I'd like to see you try. This hat's seen more action than a brothel on payday, and probably caught just as many diseases," Naya muttered, engrossed in her search for the outpost's digital threads. The plan was straightforward. Get in, steal any tidbits of data about the FTL ban, and get out before the Dominion noticed something was off. Simple. Clean. About as likely to go smoothly as a one-legged man winning a marathon. "I'm picking up some chatter," Naya announced, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her pad. "Looks like they've got a team stationed not far ahead." "Something about a delivery. Hope they're not expecting a pizza," Cody said. "Hate to disappoint." Thane held up a hand, signaling for silence. He had the kind of ears that could hear a whisper in a hurricane, and right now they were picking up the distinct sound of boots on metal. "Heads up. We might have company." The crew pressed themselves against the tunnel walls, slipping into the shadows like whispers in the dark. Thane's pulse quickened, a familiar dance of adrenaline and anticipation. He had played this game before, 1,000 times in 1,000 different places, and it never got old. "You think they've got us pegged?" Grizz asked, his voice barely above a rumble. "Doubt it," Thane replied. "But let's not stick around to find out." They moved silently, each step careful and deliberate. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on, and Thane couldn't help but marvel at how much he loved this part. The uncertainty, the thrill of the unknown. It was like being on stage with a script that could change at any moment. "I see the entrance," Naya whispered, pointing towards a heavy door set into the tunnel's side. "Just up ahead." Thane nodded, motioning the others to follow his lead. As they approached, the door slid open with a reluctant groan, revealing a starkly lit control room that hummed with the soft buzz of electronics. It was manned by two guards who, judging by their glazed expressions, had about as much enthusiasm for their job as a cat in a bathtub. "You handle the one on the left," Thane instructed Cody, who nodded and drew his weapon with the precision of a maestro tuning an instrument. "I'll take the right," Grizz grunted, cracking his knuckles in a way that suggested he was looking forward to a bit of action. Thane slipped through the doorway, his movements smooth and silent. Within moments, it was over. Cody's shot was silent and precise, a quick pulse of energy that left the guard on the floor before he could register surprise. Grizz's approach was more personal, a swift blow that sent his target into the land of unconscious dreams, probably involving a lot fewer headaches. "Neat and tidy," Naya said, stepping past the bodies with a nod of approval. "You guys missed your calling as janitors." "I'd hate to see what kind of establishment would hire us," Cody said, holstering his weapon with a flourish. Thane moved to the central console, eyes scanning for anything that might point them in the right direction. The room was a minimalist's dream, just enough space for the essential tech and not a millimeter more. "See anything useful?" Grizz asked, leaning over his shoulder. "Patience is a virtue," Thane replied, though truthfully he had about as much patience as a child on a sugar high. Naya slipped in beside him, her fingers flying over the keys like a virtuoso. "Got something," she said, bringing up a series of schematics on the main display. "Looks like they've got some kind of prototype tech stored here. Could be related to the FTL ban. Seems like a hell of a coincidence." Thane mused, crossing his arms. In our line of work, there are no coincidences, Cody said, eyes scanning the room for any signs of trouble. Only people who can't keep a secret. Before Thane could reply, alarms blared, filling the chamber with an ear-splitting wail that was as subtle as a punch to the gut. Red warning lights flashed, casting everything in a hellish glow. "Looks like we overstayed our welcome," Naya said, unfazed as she continued to siphon data onto her pad. "Time to vacate," Thane ordered, already heading for the door. "Move it, people." They spilled into the corridor, the sound of approaching boots echoing down the passage like a doom-laden drumbeat. The narrow confines funneled them forward, the labyrinthine twists offering little refuge from their pursuers. "We've got company," Cody announced, stealing a glance over his shoulder. "And they don't look like they want to discuss the weather, no problem," Grizz said, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. "I wasn't planning on talking." They ran, feet pounding against the metal floor as they raced through the maze. Behind them, the Dominion enforcers closed in, their shouts mingling with the wailing alarms. Naya veered down a side tunnel, her eyes glued to her pad. "This way. I found us a shortcut. You better be right about this," Thane called, skidding around a corner. "I've got a date with a bottle of synthale later." The shortcut was more of a death trap, barely wide enough for one person to squeeze through at a time. As they ducked and twisted their way through the labyrinth, Thane couldn't help but think about how much he hated tight spaces. Almost there, Naya assured them, though her voice was strained with effort. "Just another 100 meters or so. You're sure about this?" Cody asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "If I'm wrong, you can have my share of the next job," Naya replied, her grin audible even in the dark. "Deal," Cody said, breathless but grinning. "I'll take that bet any day." They emerged into a larger tunnel, the air cool and heavy with the scent of ionized metal. The path stretched out before them, a straight shot to freedom. There, an airlock, Thane pointed, urging them onward. "Let's make like a tree and get the hell out of here." The Dominion enforcers were hot on their heels, their shouts growing louder, but the crew was faster, a mix of desperation and adrenaline fueling their escape. "Open it," Thane shouted as they skidded to a halt before the airlock. Now, Naya hit the controls, and the door opened with agonizing slowness, the mechanism grinding in protest. "Would it kill them to grease the damn hinges?" Cody muttered, casting a wary glance back as their pursuers rounded the corner. "Not if we kill them first," Grizz replied, stepping forward to provide cover, his weapon at the ready. The airlock door finally slid open, revealing the void beyond. One by one they piled in, the enforcers only seconds behind. "Close it." "Close it," Thane barked, pressing himself against the wall as the door began its sluggish retreat. "Come on, you piece of junk," Naya urged, her fingers flying over the controls to seal the hatch before their pursuers could reach them. With a final, reluctant groan, the door shut, cutting off the shouts of the Dominion enforcers. They were safe, or at least as safe as they could be with the stars as their only sanctuary. "We're clear," Naya said, leaning against the wall, her breath coming in sharp bursts. "For now, nice work," Thane said, clapping her on the shoulder. "Remind me to never doubt you when it comes to shortcuts." "I'll add it to the list," she replied, finally allowing herself a satisfied smile. Cody looked around, catching his breath. "So what's next on the agenda? Drinks? Dinner?" "A nice stroll through an asteroid field," Thane grinned, the thrill of the chase still coursing through his veins. "First, we find out what the hell this prototype is. Then we see if it can help us lift the FTL ban. And if it doesn't," Grizz asked, arms crossed. Thane shrugged, the weight of the universe settling back onto his shoulders. "Then we find something that does. One way or another, we're not going back to Earth empty-handed." The crew nodded, their resolve as unyielding as the stars themselves. They had come too far, risked too much, to let the Dominion keep them grounded. Whatever it took, they'd see this through to the end. As they drifted away from the asteroid, the vastness of space stretched out before them, a canvas dark and infinite, filled with possibilities and danger in equal measure. They were a small crew in a big galaxy, but they wouldn't be underestimated. Not when the stakes were this high. Next stop, Thane said, his eyes fixed on the stars. Wherever the hell the universe decides to take us. And with that they vanished into the void, leaving behind only the echoes of their laughter and the promise of what was to come. The crew huddled in the cramped confines of the ship's command room, the stolen data projected across the central holographic display like a treasure map for the terminally unlucky. The air was thick with anticipation, and the faint smell of Cody's socks, which everyone silently agreed to endure rather than address. "Well, this is a cluster of bad decisions waiting to happen," Thane said, squinting at the data. It was a mosaic of schematics, coded transmissions, and enough technical jargon to make a tech head weep tears of joy or frustration, depending on their disposition. Naya, ever the optimist where circuits and code were involved, tapped her datapad with a flourish. "Looks like we've found ourselves a lab tucked away on the far side of Andrones 7. That's where they're keeping the tech related to the FTL ban." Cody snorted, adjusting his hat, which seemed to be having an identity crisis between a fedora and a dumpster fire. "Great. A secret lab, because those are always a breeze to infiltrate." Grizz crossed his arms, the picture of skepticism wrapped in a gruff exterior. "And what are the chances we get off Andrones 7 in one piece if we pull this off?" "About the same as me winning a beauty pageant," Thane replied. "But then, what's life without a little risk?" "A lot longer," Grizz muttered. They'd barely had time to let the implications of their impending suicide mission sink in when the ship's intercom crackled to life. The voice was smooth, a touch too polished, like a salesman who'd perfected the art of selling life insurance to androids. "Good evening, crew of the Rust Bucket," the voice said, each word dripping with condescension. Thane rolled his eyes. "Zephyr, you arrogant bastard, cut the theatrics and get to the point." Zephyr Knox, the enigmatic engineer they'd picked up a few jobs back, made his entrance, virtually, as was his preference. He had a reputation for knowing things he shouldn't and being where he shouldn't be, which was impressive, given his tendency to avoid actual physical presence. "I see you've uncovered my little project," Zephyr said, his face appearing on a smaller display, all smirks and shadows. "And just when I thought you couldn't get any more interesting." "That's one word for it," Naya said, arms crossed. She'd always been wary of Zephyr's motives, but right now they needed his expertise more than they needed certainty. "So, what's the catch?" Thane asked, leaning back with a casualness he didn't feel. Zephyr's eyes glittered with a mix of mischief and something darker. "No catch, just an opportunity. The lab isn't just a lab, it's a vault. And what they're hiding in there makes FTL tech look like child's play." "Sounds like you're suggesting we help ourselves to more than just the FTL tech," Cody said, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "And here I thought we were just common thieves." "Think of it as an upgrade," Zephyr replied smoothly. "A chance to trade up from peasants to kings. Or corpses," Grizz added. "Let's not forget that option." The crew exchanged glances, the kind that conveyed a dozen unspoken doubts and dreams. They danced with death more times than was healthy, and here it was again, extending a skeletal hand. "All right," Thane said, after a moment's consideration. "We'll go after the FTL tech and whatever else we can carry. But Zephyr, if you've got any more surprises up your sleeve, now's the time to spill." Zephyr chuckled, a sound that was all confidence and no comfort. "No surprises, just promises. And a reminder, if you're going to steal from the Galactic Dominion, you better make damn sure it's worth it." With that, his image winked out, leaving the crew to contemplate their next move in the silent hum of the ship. "Well, isn't he a ray of sunshine?" Cody said, breaking the tension. "You think we can trust him?" "Nope," Thane replied bluntly. "But we can trust him to want something out of this, and for now that's enough." Naya sighed, tapping her datapad with renewed focus. "I'll plot a course to Andrones 7. If we're going to do this, we need a plan. A good one." Grizz grunted in agreement. "And backup. Lots of it. We're going to need all the help we can get." They spent the next few hours hashing out the best way to break into a supposedly impenetrable fortress of science and secrecy. It was the kind of brainstorming session that usually only happened in action holovids, complete with unlikely odds and improbable solutions. "We'll come in low, skimming the atmosphere to avoid detection," Naya explained, highlighting their approach vector on the display. "Once we're close enough, we can use the ship's cloaking tech to mask our presence." "Make sure we're invisible," Thane said, eyes fixed on the schematics. "Not just hidden. I don't want to find out how many blasters it takes to blow us out of the sky." "And once we're inside?" Cody asked. "Then we improvise," Thane replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Like always." Grizz let out a bark of laughter. "So we're flying blind without a net into a pit of potential death. Sounds like one of our usual ventures." "Exactly," Thane said. "Just another day in paradise." They moved into the preparation phase, each crew member slipping into their roles like second skins. Cody checked their weapons, making sure each piece was loaded and ready. Naya double-checked the ship systems, her fingers a blur of precision and practicality. Thane took a moment to look around, the familiar weight of leadership settling on his shoulders. He knew the risks, but he'd long since stopped fearing them. Out here, you learn to live with danger like an old friend you couldn't quite shake. As the ship powered up, thrumming with potential energy, he felt the familiar tug of adventure, of the unknown stretching out before them. It was a siren's call, and he was powerless to resist. "Ready?" he asked, looking at each of his crew in turn. Cody gave him a mock salute. "As I'll ever be." Naya offered a nod, her expression a mix of excitement and determination. "Let's do this." Grizz just grinned, the kind of grin that usually preceded mayhem. "Bring it on." With a flick of a switch, the ship surged forward, slicing through the black void of space like a blade. Andrones 7 awaited, a distant speck on the horizon of their fate. As they approached the planet, its swirling clouds and jagged terrain coming into view, Thane couldn't help but reflect on the madness of their mission. They were a ragtag band of misfits, each carrying their own scars and secrets, yet somehow bound together by purpose and peril. "Here's to not dying," Thane said, lifting an imaginary glass as they descended into the atmosphere. "Cheers to that," Cody replied, adjusting his hat as the ship rocked slightly with the turbulence. "And to making it out with more than just a good story." "Assuming we don't end up as the story," Naya added with a wry smile. They broke through the cloud cover, the sprawling expanse of Andrones 7 unfolding beneath them, a mix of barren wastelands and industrial sprawl. Somewhere down there was the lab, hidden beneath layers of security and secrecy. "Looks cozy," Grizz remarked, peering out at the desolate landscape. "Just like home," Cody quipped. "If home was a post-apocalyptic hellscape." Naya guided the ship toward the coordinates, her hands steady on the controls. They flew low and fast, skimming the surface like a shadow. The lab lay ahead, a fortress of steel and stone embedded in the rocky terrain. As they approached, the ship's cloaking tech activated, wrapping them in a shroud of invisibility. It was a temporary solution, but it would give them the element of surprise. At least that was the hope. "Here we go," Thane said, his heart thundering in his chest. "Remember the plan. In and out, quick and quiet." "Quick and quiet," Grizz echoed. "Not our specialties, but we'll make it work." They landed in a narrow canyon, the ship's engines powering down with a low whine. The crew disembarked, their boots crunching on the rocky ground. Ahead of them, the entrance to the lab loomed like a mouth waiting to swallow them whole. "Everyone ready?" Thane asked, checking his weapon. "Ready as we'll ever be," Naya replied, her datapad at the ready. They moved forward, a squad of shadows slipping through the darkness. The lab's security grid was extensive, but Naya's expertise and a few choice hacks bought them access. Inside, the corridors were sterile, silent but for the hum of machinery. It was a place that spoke of precision and power, a cathedral to the gods of technology. "Stay sharp," Thane whispered, his voice barely a breath. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." They passed through a series of checkpoints, each more secure than the last. The stolen data had given them a roadmap, but it didn't account for the unexpected, a fact they knew all too well. Cody paused, his eyes drawn to a wall display showing an array of weaponry that made his fingers itch. "Think we could borrow a few of these on our way out?" "Focus," Grizz growled. "We're here for the tech, remember?" Cody sighed, reluctantly tearing his gaze away. Yeah, but a man can dream." They reached the central chamber, a vast room dominated by a massive containment unit. The walls thrummed with power, the air electric with possibility. Naya approached the console, her fingers dancing across the keys. Lines of code scrolled by, a symphony of data revealing its secrets to her practiced eye. "Got it," she said, her voice triumphant. "This is it, the FTL tech. Grab everything you can," Thane instructed. "We don't get a second chance at this." They worked swiftly, extracting data and securing components. The room seemed to pulse with urgency, as if aware of the intrusion. "Let's move," Thane said, his instincts prickling with warning. "We've overstayed our welcome." They retraced their steps, the weight of their prize heavy in their packs. But just as they reached the exit, the alarms blared, a cacophony of sound that rattled their bones. "Looks like they noticed," Cody said, his voice edged with adrenaline. "Run," Thane ordered, urgency driving them forward. They sprinted toward the ship, the corridors echoing with the clamor of pursuit. Security droids emerged from hidden alcoves, their optics flaring red with hostile intent. Grizz opened fire, his weapon barking a staccato rhythm as they raced for the exit. Naya sent commands to her datapad, doors slamming shut in their wake to slow their pursuers. They burst into the crisp night air, the ship looming ahead like a beacon of hope. The engines roared to life as they piled aboard, the hatch slamming shut behind them. "Get us out of here," Thane shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Naya didn't need telling twice. The ship lifted off, engines straining as they clawed for the sky. Behind them, the lab blazed with alarm lights, a hive of activity roiling like a disturbed anthill. As they cleared the atmosphere, leaving Andrones 7 behind, the crew shared a collective breath of relief. They'd pulled off the impossible once more, though the cost had yet to be tallied. "Guess we're not dead," Cody said, his grin wide and irreverent. "Not yet," Thane replied, allowing himself a smile. But the night's still young. With their prize secured and the stars stretching out before them, the crew of the Rust Bucket sailed onward, bound for the unknown and whatever lay beyond. The Rust Bucket was a patchwork of old tech and desperation, the kind of ship that looked like it was held together with hope and duct tape. It was a perfect reflection of its crew, mismatched, flawed, and just a bit too reckless for anyone's comfort. But here they were, charging headlong into another scrape, this time an asteroid full of Dominion tech, and, presumably, enough firepower to render them into cosmic dust. "Anyone else feel like we're the heroes of a really bad action flick?" Cody asked, adjusting his hat in a way that suggested he thought it gave him a rakish air instead of making him look like a wannabe space cowboy. Thane snorted, double-checking his blaster's charge. "If we're the heroes, someone seriously botched the casting. The plan was simple on paper. Get in, grab the FTL tech, get out. Simple never accounted for the Dominion's advanced security systems or the fact that they probably had more guns than a paranoid conspiracy theorist's bunker. But who needed simple when you had Zephyr Knox? Zephyr was a ghost in the machine, a presence that flitted through circuits and code like a mischievous spirit. Though she'd never left the ship in person, she had a way with tech that bordered on sorcery. One moment, the Dominion's security grid was a fortress. The next, it was a sieve, thanks to her not-so-gentle persuasion. "Keep going, Naya," Zephyr's voice crackled over the comms, her presence as vivid as if she were in the room. "I've opened up a path, but it won't stay that way for long. This system's tighter than Grizz's wallet." "Hey, I'm fiscally responsible," Grizz grumbled, his eyes scanning the corridor for threats. "And you'd be too if you'd seen my ex-wife's spending habits." They were deep in the belly of the beast now. The corridors were a maze of sterile metal and flickering lights. The kind of place that screamed nothing bad ever happens here with the sincerity of a used starship salesman. "What's the story on these droids?" Thane asked, nodding to the distant clatter of mechanical footsteps. "Standard Dominion Guard units," Zephyr replied. "Heavily armored, built like tanks, and about as smart as a box of rocks." "Great. My favorite kind," Cody said, hefting his blaster. "They're like cats, point and shoot." The crew moved with purpose, Naya at the forefront with her datapad, dancing through firewalls and bypassing security protocols like a virtuoso. Thane, Grizz, and Cody provided muscle, a trio of caution and chaos ready to meet whatever unfortunate souls got in their way. Their prize lay in the central chamber, a monolithic structure that hummed with the kind of power that could theoretically make the whole FTL ban a moot point. Naya's fingers worked the console with surgical precision, extracting data while Grizz and Cody kept their eyes peeled and their blasters ready. "Hurry it up, Naya," Thane urged, his voice a low growl. "That back door's not going to hold." "Doing my best," Naya replied, her brow furrowed with concentration. "You ever try ripping a steak out of a bear's mouth? It's kind of like that." The alarms went off seconds later because of course they did. The Dominion must have had a sixth sense for sabotage, or maybe it was just the obvious choice when dealing with a ragtag crew of thieves. "Time's up, folks," Zephyr warned. "You've got incoming and they don't look friendly." With the data secured, they bolted, the corridors behind them filled with the ominous clank of security droids and the flash of red alert lights. Thane led the charge, the path a blur of metal and shadows. "Why do we always do this?" Cody panted, narrowly avoiding a stray blaster bolt. "Why do we always pick the jobs with the most guns and the least chance of survival?" "Because they're the only ones that pay," Thane shot back, firing over his shoulder. Their escape turned frantic as the Dominion forces closed in, blasters lighting up the dreary corridors like a fireworks show gone horribly wrong. Grizz took out a pair of droids with well-placed shots, while Zephyr disrupted their targeting systems enough to buy them critical seconds. "Ship's ready for takeoff," Zephyr announced in their ears. "But move your asses, we're cutting it close." They barreled toward the exit, a droid's shot grazing Thane's shoulder and leaving a smoking burn. He hissed, gritting his teeth against the pain, but there was no time to stop. Behind them, the reinforcements were relentless, a tide of metal and menace. Naya skidded to a halt just short of the exit, her datapad flashing a warning. "Damn it, they've locked the doors." "Override it," Thane snapped, blasting a droid that got too close. "I'm trying." Her fingers flew over the keys, and for a moment the tension ratcheted up to unbearable levels. Then the door shuddered open with a reluctant groan, the path to freedom visible once more. They emerged into the harsh glare of artificial sunlight, the ship waiting for them like a faithful dog eager to flee from a firecracker-filled backyard. But as they sprinted for the hatch, the unexpected happened. A squad of Dominion soldiers appeared from a side passage, cutting off their advance. Thane swore, raising his blaster, but it wasn't enough. In the chaos that followed, Grizz pushed Naya toward the ship, a wordless command to run, and then he was lost in a blur of motion and light. "Grizz!" Cody shouted, but the noise swallowed his cry. The rest of them stumbled aboard, lungs burning, hearts hammering. Naya's eyes were wide with shock, her mind struggling to process the reality. Grizz was still out there, somewhere behind the wall of Dominion forces. "Zephyr, we need to go," Thane barked, the words scraping his throat like broken glass. "But Grizz," Naya began, desperation in her voice. "He's buying us time," Thane said, his words harsh and unyielding. "We can't help him if we're dead." The ship's engines roared to life, the thrusters engaging with a rush that rattled bones and teeth. They lifted off, the ground falling away beneath them, leaving behind the chaos and the reality of their loss. In the cockpit, Zephyr's holographic form flickered, her expression one of grim determination. Coordinates set, punching it. The stars stretched into lines as the ship leapt into hyperspace, leaving Andrones 7 and its deadly secret behind. Silence fell over the crew, heavy and suffocating, a silence broken only by the harsh, ragged breaths of those who remained. They'd secured the data, escaped with their lives, but the cost was a gaping wound in their number. "Grizz will make it," Cody said, more hope than certainty in his voice. "He's stubborn as hell." "Yeah," Thane agreed, though he knew the odds. "He is." In the quiet aftermath, with the adrenaline ebbing and the reality of their situation settling in, the crew retreated to their respective corners. Naya hunched over her datapad, replaying the escape over and over, searching for something she could have done differently. "Don't beat yourself up, Naya." Zepha's voice came over the comm, gentle now. "We did what we could." "Doesn't feel like enough," Naya muttered, her eyes burning with a mixture of anger and grief. "Welcome to the club," Cody said, slumping into a seat with a weary sigh. "First rule of the job, you'll never feel like you did enough." Thane stood silently in the center of their makeshift common room, his mind running through possibilities, contingencies, and 1,000 variations of what if. But every path led back to the same conclusion. They'd lost one of their own, and the only way to make it right was to ensure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. "We'll figure it out," he promised, though whether it was to himself or the crew, he couldn't be sure. "One way or another, we'll figure it out. Assuming the Dominion doesn't fry us first," Cody pointed out, ever the pessimist. "Yeah, well," Thane said, the ghost of a smile on his lips. "We're overdue for some good luck." The stars outside the viewport were a blur of motion, an endless sea of possibilities and dangers. Ahead lay uncertainty, the kind of unknown that tested resolve and strained loyalties. But if there was one thing the Rust Bucket and its crew knew how to do, it was survive. One way or another, they'd make it through. They had to. Because out there, beyond the stars and the reach of the Dominion, was the one thing that mattered more than anything else: freedom. It was a fleeting thing, freedom. But they'd chase it with everything they had, even if it meant skirting the edge of oblivion to do so. And if Grizz was still out there, somewhere, somehow, they'd find him. Because this crew might be a ragtag bunch of misfits, but they were a family, and you didn't leave family behind. No matter the cost. The Rust Bucket floated through the inky void, a patchwork of metal and dreams held together by little more than duct tape and sheer bloody-mindedness. Inside, the crew sat scattered around the common area, nursing the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals and bad marriage proposals. "Well, that was a lovely little clusterfuck," Cody said, leaning back and adjusting his hat like some kind of space cowboy trying to look nonchalant. He was anything but. "Come on, Cody," Naya replied, staring at her datapad like it might offer solutions if she just glared hard enough. "Don't sugarcoat it. Tell us how you really feel." "I'd say we're royally screwed, but that'd imply we had a chance to begin with," Zepha's voice crackled from the ship's comm system. Her holographic form flickered into view, a ghostly figure leaning against the bulkhead with her arms crossed. "And now we've lost Grizz too." "He's not lost," Thane interjected, his voice a touch gruffer than usual, like gravel on tin. "He's just temporarily unavailable." "Right," Cody snorted. "Like my last paycheck, temporarily unavailable till further notice." Thane rubbed his temples, feeling every bit the captain he was supposed to be, which, at that moment, felt somewhere south of incompetent and out of options. The weight of Grizz's absence hung heavy, a specter in their midst. "Look, we all know the Dominion's not gonna let this go," Thane said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "They've got Grizz, and they'll be tightening the noose around us." "Great. So we're the bait and Grizz is the worm," Naya muttered, the bitterness in her voice sharp enough to cut. "If we're the bait, then let's at least be the kind that gives him indigestion," Zepha suggested, a wry smile ghosting across her lips. "Problem is we're running on fumes here," Cody pointed out. "Not much left to give anyone indigestion, maybe some mild heartburn at best." Thane glanced around at his crew, a motley collection of cynics and dreamers, bound together by desperation and a shared disregard for authority. In another life, they might have been doing something respectable, like smuggling or mercenary work. But this was a suicide mission with extra steps. "All right," Thane said, pushing to his feet with the kind of resolve that belonged to someone who didn't have any other choice. "We need a plan. Naya, how's the data looking?" Naya sighed, her fingers dancing over her datapad. "I've got the files, but we're still far from cracking them open. It's like trying to pick a lock with a wet noodle." "Zephyr, can you get us a lead on Dominion movements?" Thane asked. "Already working on it," she replied, her form flickering as she dove back into the ship's systems. "Give me a few Iors, and I might have something that doesn't rhyme with we're hosed." The ship hummed around them, a symphony of creaks and groans that only added to the sense of impending doom. But they'd been in tight spots before. Hell, they'd practically set up shop in tight spots. "Let's prioritize," Thane said, pacing the room. "We need to refuel, rearm, and find a way to get Grizz back, preferably in that order. And preferably without becoming galactic toast," Cody added. That too. The plan, if it could be called that, was as thin as the ship's hull. But it was something, and right now something was better than nothing. They coasted through space, the stars outside a blur of motion. With each passing moment, the looming threat of the Dominion grew, a shadow darkening their path. Several Iors later, the crew reconvened in the common area, the air thick with tension and exhaustion. Zephyr's hologram buzzed to life, her expression unreadable. "I've got some intel," she announced, cutting through the silence like a laser. "The Dominion set up a blockade on the asteroid belt. They're looking to uproot our little hideaway." "Fantastic," Cody drawled, "as if we needed more incentive to relocate." "But I found a potential way in," Zephyr continued, ignoring Cody's sarcasm. "There's a supply route they haven't fully secured yet. We might be able to slip through if we're careful." "Careful ain't exactly our strong suit," Thane said, crossing his arms. "But I guess beggars can't be choosers." "Speak for yourself," Naya quipped. "I beg and choose all the time. Usually what drink I'm gonna drown my sorrows in." "Guess it's time to play sneak past the angry space navy," Cody said, standing with a theatrical stretch. "Been a while since we stretched those muscles." The plan was simple, which suited them just fine. The simpler, the better when the stakes were high and the odds were low. The rust bucket would slip through the supply route, dodging Dominion patrols like a particularly wily cockroach. "Everyone know their roles?" Thane asked, glancing around. He received nods in return, each member grimly determined. Zephyr fired up the engines, the ship vibrating with a familiar energy. "All right, folks, let's dance." The rust bucket crept through the asteroid belt like a whisper, its thrusters barely a murmur in the void. The tension on board was palpable, each crew member hyper-aware of the stakes. "Remember, we're just another supply ship," Naya reminded them, her voice low. "Right. Because we totally blend in with our charming rust aesthetic," Cody replied dryly. "Just keep your eyes peeled," Thane said, gripping the edges of his seat like it might offer some stability in the face of chaos. "And try not to do anything heroic." "Heroic?" Cody laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Never been my style." The ship approached the Dominion supply line, the blockade stretching out in a menacing line of ships and weapons. Zephyr's fingers danced over the controls, her holographic form a blur of concentration. "Just a little closer," she murmured, her voice a thread of tension. They edged past the first line of ships, the rust bucket systems humming in protest. Thane held his breath, his heart pounding in time with the ship's engines. "Almost there," Zephyr whispered, her eyes locked on the display. "Come on, you beautiful bastard, hold together." The rust bucket eased past the final ship, slipping into the safety of the supply route like a shadow. Thane released the breath he'd been holding, relief flooding through him. "See." "Piece of cake," Cody said, though the sweat on his brow told a different story. "Yeah, a piece of cake with a side of explosive frosting," Naya muttered, her fingers a blur on her datapad. The crew settled into a tense silence, the ship cruising through the asteroid field with a lazy grace. They were running on borrowed time, but for now, they'd bought themselves a moment of peace. "Zephyr, what's next?" Thane asked, his voice low. "There's a refueling station nearby," she replied. "We swing by, top off, and then figure out our next move." Sounds like a plan, Thane said, though the word felt hollow in the face of their reality. The rust bucket adjusted course, angling toward the refueling station with a purposeful grace. The crew sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts. Naya broke the quiet, her voice soft. "What if we can't get Grizz back?" "We will," Thane replied, though the words felt like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. "And if we don't?" Cody asked, his eyes dark. "Then we'll fight till we can't," Thane said, his voice firm. "It's what Grizz would do." The refueling station loomed ahead, a beacon of temporary reprieve in the vast expanse. They docked with a thud, the ship shuddering as it latched onto the station. "All right, folks," Thane said, standing. "Make it quick. We've got work to do." The crew disembarked, the station's sterile corridors a stark contrast to the rust bucket's lived-in chaos. They moved with purpose, gathering supplies and fuel with practiced efficiency. As they worked, Thane's mind churned with possibilities and contingencies. They were a ragtag group of renegades facing down the might of the Dominion, but they'd done the impossible before, and they'd do it again, because sometimes that was all you had, hope and a refusal to quit. They'd find a way to get Grizz back, or they'd go down trying. Either way, they weren't done yet, not by a long shot. And the Dominion? Well, they were about to learn that you don't mess with the crew of the rust bucket and expect to come away unscathed. Because whether by luck, grit, or sheer bloody-mindedness, they'd find a way to survive. They always did. The refueling station was about as welcoming as a rattlesnake in a punch bowl. Dull metallic corridors stretched like endless misery, punctuated by flickering lights that gave new meaning to mood lighting. The rust bucket docked with a clang that suggested it might fall apart at any moment, but that was par for the course. "All right, everybody," Thane said, trying to sound like a captain who had a clue. "We've got a window to refuel and restock before the Dominion figures out we're not just a supply ship. So let's move like we've got a purpose, yeah." "What's the matter, Captain?" Cody grinned, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Afraid the Dominion's gonna throw us a party?" "Yeah," Naya chimed in. "A Friends of the Dominion mixer. We can mingle over cocktails and small talk about how much we love authoritarian regimes." Zepha's holographic form flickered beside them, her expression one of perpetual amusement. "You two done? Or should I call the event planner?" Thane rolled his eyes, the weight of leadership feeling more like an anchor around his neck than a badge of honor. "Let's focus, folks. We're here to make sure we don't become space dust." The crew scattered through the corridors, each with tasks that suited their questionable skills. Cody was off to barter with the station's less-than-savory quartermaster, the kind of character who made weasels look noble. Naya headed to the tech bay, her datapad ready to charm whatever half-dead terminals she could find. Meanwhile, Thane and Zepha made their way to the command center to scrounge for information like scavengers picking a carcass. The station's command hub was a relic from a bygone era, held together by stubbornness and rust. Zepha jacked into the mainframe, her fingers dancing like she was orchestrating a symphony of ones and zeros. Thane leaned back, letting his gaze wander over the dimly lit displays. "So, Zepha, what's the plan? We gonna pull a rabbit out of this rust bucket's hat? More like a genetically engineered super rabbit," she quipped, her eyes never leaving the screen. "The Dominion's got weaknesses, cracks in their armor we can exploit. I just need to find one big enough for us to squeeze through." "Just make sure it's the kind of squeeze that doesn't land us in the brig," Thane replied. Zepha smirked. "No promises." While Zepha worked her digital magic, Thane's mind drifted to Grizz. The big lug was out there, God knew where, likely giving the Dominion a headache without even trying. He'd always had a knack for sticking it to the man in the most inconvenient ways. "You think Grizz is okay?" Thane asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. "Grizz is tougher than a 2-credit steak," Zepha said. "If anyone's coming out of this in one piece, it's that mountain of muscle." Thane nodded, reassured despite himself. Grizz was family and they'd get him back, or die trying. Not the best plan, but when had they ever had one of those? Zepha's eyes lit up, a grin spreading across her face. "Got it." "Got what?" Thane asked, leaning forward. A way to turn the tables, Zephyr said, her voice barely containing her excitement. The Dominion's got a cache of experimental tech on this very asteroid. Stuff they're too scared to use but could give us the edge we need. Thane raised an eyebrow. And we're just supposed to waltz in and help ourselves. Pretty much, Zephyr replied. But don't worry, I've got a little trick up my sleeve. Your sleeves are made of light, Zephyr, Thane pointed out. Figure of speech, Captain Literal, she shot back. It's a data manipulation trick. Think of it like hacking but sexier. If we can tap into their system, we can unleash a little chaos. Chaos is our middle name, Thane said with a wry smile. All right, let's get the others. Time to share the good news. They regrouped in the Rust Bucket's cramped common area, the air thick with the acrid scent of burnt coffee and desperation. Cody returned from his mission with a grin and a sack of questionable supplies. Managed to get us some spare parts, he announced. Don't ask what I traded for him. Do I want to know? Naya asked, looking up from her datapad. Not unless you enjoy nightmares, Cody replied. Thane cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. We've got a lead on some Dominion tech right here on the asteroid. It's risky, but if we can get our hands on it, we might stand a chance. Dominion tech, Naya asked, eyes widening. That's like robbing a bear while it's hibernating. One wrong move and we're bear chow. Yeah, but if we pull it off, we might just come out kings, Cody said, leaning back with a cocky grin. Or at least not dead. The plan's to create enough chaos to slip in and grab what we need, Zephyr explained. Think of it as a smash-in grab, only we're the ones getting smashed if it goes wrong. Love the optimism, Naya said dryly. Thane ran a hand through his hair, the weight of command settling in like an unwanted guest. Look, it's our best shot, and whatever tech we get, it might just help us get Grizz back. A murmur of agreement passed through the crew. They didn't trust the plan, but they trusted each other. That was enough. So we all know what we're doing? Thane asked, looking around. Nods all around, grim, determined, ready. All right, let's move. Time to show the Dominion what a bad day actually looks like. With Zephyr's guidance, the Rust Bucket's motley crew navigated the labyrinthine corridors beneath the refueling station, the metal walls echoing their footsteps like a chorus of impending doom. We're close, Zephyr said, her holographic form leading the way. The cache is just beyond this corridor. How do you know? Cody asked, skeptical. You got some secret map you're not sharing. Something like that, she replied cryptically. Let's just say I have a flair for finding treasure. Naya snorted. And here I thought your only talent was annoying the hell out Tommy. They approached a heavily reinforced door, the kind that screamed "Do not enter" with all the subtlety of a cannon blast. Zephyr interfaced with the door's control panel, her fingers working like a master pianist. Looks like they've got this locked tighter than a miser's wallet, she muttered. But nothing a little creative persuasion can't handle. After a few tense moments, the door hissed open with a reluctant groan. Beyond lay a room filled with Dominion tech, gleaming under the harsh lighting like forbidden fruit. Jackpot, Cody breathed, stepping in with a reverence normally reserved for holy sites. Naya moved to the nearest console, her eyes scanning the alien tech with a mixture of awe and greed. Okay, this stuff's way above my pay grade, but it's definitely Dominion. Thane moved to the center, eyes taking in the array of devices and weaponry. Let's not get too comfortable. We grab what we need and get out before they realize we've crashed their party. Zephyr tapped into the room's systems, her expression one of fierce concentration. I'm setting up a feedback loop. It'll cover our tracks for a while, make it look like a glitch. And if they see through it, Thane asked. Then we run fast and hope they have bad aim, she replied. Cody chuckled, starting to pile gear into his arms. That's the spirit. As they worked, an alarm suddenly blared, the lights flashing red like an angry god's warning. Well, that's not good, Naya remarked, stating the obvious. The loop didn't hold, Zephyr said, her voice tense. We've got company. Time to move, Thane ordered, urgency in his voice. Grab what you can and haul ass. They sprinted back down the corridor, their arms full of stolen tech and hearts pounding like war drums. Behind them, the sound of boots and shouts echoed, closing in like a net. "Zephyr, which way?" Thane called, panic threading through his words. "Left then right," she instructed, her holographic form darting ahead. "I've got a path to the rust bucket." They skidded around corners, adrenaline driving them onward. The Dominion troops were relentless, a tide of authority crushing everything in its path. But the crew of the rust bucket had never been ones to bow to authority. "Almost there," Zephyr shouted as they barreled toward the docking bay. The rust bucket loomed ahead, a battered but familiar sight. The crew rushed aboard, the ship's engines already idling, ready to leap into the void at a moment's notice. "Everyone in," Thane yelled, breathless. "We're good," Cody confirmed, slapping the hatch control. "Let's blow this joint before they bring out the welcome wagon." Zephyr punched coordinates into the nav system, her fingers a blur. "Hold on to something. This is gonna be rough." The rust bucket lurched forward, the docking clamps releasing with a jolt that made Thane grateful for seatbelts. The ship careened through the station, dodging debris and enemy fire with reckless abandon. "Zephyr, now would be a great time for some of that chaos you promised," Thane shouted over the roar of the engines. "On it," she replied, activating the tech they'd managed to snatch. A wave of interference radiated out, scrambling sensors and disrupting communications. The Dominion systems flickered, their response slowing just enough for the rust bucket to slip away. They shot out of the station like a bat out of hell, the stars blurring into lines as they engaged their drives. Behind them, the Dominion scrambled, trying to recover from the unexpected sucker punch. "Everyone all right?" Thane asked, his heart still hammering. "Define all right," Naya replied, running a hand through her hair. "But yeah, we're alive." Cody let out a breathless laugh. "Guess we can add grand larceny to our resume." Zephyr's holographic form flickered, a satisfied smirk on her lips. "Told you we'd pull it off." Thane couldn't help but smile, the weight of their success lifting his spirits. "All right, let's get some distance, regroup, and see what we've stolen." As the rust bucket hurtled through space, the crew settled into a tense but hopeful silence. They'd pulled off the impossible, but the road ahead was still fraught with danger. But for now, they had a fighting chance. And sometimes that's all you need to take on the universe. "So, what's our next brilliant move, Captain?" Cody asked, chewing on his lower lip, the tension in the cramped cockpit of the rust bucket as thick as the stench of burnt wiring. Thane rubbed his temples, wishing he could massage away the migraine that came with leading a crew of misfits through potential suicide missions. "Zephyr, give me options. And make 'em good ones." Zephyr's holographic form flickered into existence, looking more like a malfunctioning disco ball than the ship's tech guru. "Well, Captain, we could pretend we're a carnival troupe and offer the Dominion troops complimentary cotton candy, see if that throws them off." Naya snorted, peering over the edge of her datapad. "If sarcasm could kill, we'd have conquered the universe by now." "Look, Captain Formality," Zephyr retorted, "we've got one shot at this. The asteroid's got some unique terrain features we can exploit. Caves, chasms, and other happy death traps. We can lure them into an ambush and disable that FTL band device." Cody leaned back, stretching his arms behind his head as if lounging on a beach instead of sitting in a flying scrap heap. "Sounds like a picnic. Who's bringing the sandwiches?" Thane rolled his eyes. "All right, people. This is the plan. We create a diversion, use the rust bucket stealth systems to get close, and knock out that device quicker than a politician dodging a question." Naya sighed, flicking through her datapad. "And if something goes wrong, then we'll have a lovely fireworks show," Thane replied, the grin plastered on his face doing little to hide his apprehension. "Zephyr, how are we looking on supplies?" "Well, we can either have fuel or food, but not both. So unless someone figures out how to eat plasma, we're in for some tough dieting," Zephyr said, her holographic form pacing like a restless cat. "Right, guess we'll be eating hope and ambition," Cody said with a smirk. "Always wanted to lose a few pounds." Naya shrugged. "Look on the bright side. Maybe we'll get so thin we'll slip right past Dominion security." "Enough with the comedy club routine," Thane interjected, though he couldn't hide his own smirk. Let's move. The rust bucket descended into the asteroid's atmosphere with all the grace of a drunken elephant, the ship's hull groaning in protest. It was a patchwork masterpiece, a flying contradiction that somehow managed to avoid disintegrating into spare parts. The asteroid's surface was a hellscape of jagged rocks and shifting shadows, perfect for an ambush if you didn't mind risking death by environment. Zepha's holographic form floated over to the navigation console, her fingers dancing across the controls. There's a deep canyon ahead. We'll land there and set up our little surprise party for the Dominion, she said, her grin full of mischief. Great, just what I've always wanted, Cody quipped. A scenic tour of hell. They touched down with a bone-rattling thud, the rust bucket fitting into the canyon like an ill-fitting jigsaw piece. Outside, the wind howled, carrying whispers of doom. All right, people, Thane said, suiting up and grabbing his blaster. Let's move. Zepha, you're with Naya on tech detail. Cody, you're with me for muscle. We get in, break the FTL band device, and get out before the Dominion realizes they've been outfoxed. And if they do catch on, Naya asked, adjusting her gear. Then we run like we're being chased by a rabid space kraken, Thane replied. With weapons at the ready, they moved through the canyon, the oppressive gloom pressing in on all sides. Shadows danced like malevolent spirits, each step echoing ominously. Zepha led the way, her holographic form broadcasting a path through the maze of rocks. Keep up, folks. Don't want anyone getting lost and eaten by space wolves. Is that even a thing? Cody asked, his eyes darting nervously. Do you really want to find out? Zepha shot back. They reached a narrow passageway that opened into a larger cavern, the walls glistening with strange bioluminescent fungi. It was beautiful in a this-will-probably-kill-you kind of way. Here's the spot, Zepha said, gesturing to a control panel embedded in the rock. This should interface with the Dominion systems. Once we're in, I'll scramble their sensors, make it look like a meteor shower. Naya set to work, her fingers a blur on her datapad, connecting wires and cables with the precision of a master thief cracking a safe. Give me a minute. Take two, but we're not paying overtime, Thane joked, scanning the cavern for any signs of trouble. Suddenly, the cavern trembled, dust raining down like confetti at the world's worst party. Captain, Cody said, his voice tight, you might want to see this. Thane turned to see Dominion troops swarming the other end of the cavern, their armor gleaming and their weapons humming with lethal intent. Well, shit. Hold them off, Naya called, her voice strained. Almost got it. Cody and Thane took up positions, covering Naya and Zepha as blaster fire erupted like a deadly fireworks display. This is not how I wanted to spend my retirement, Thane muttered, popping off shots. Cody grinned, ducking behind a rock. You can retire when you're dead, which might be soon, so hang tight. The air filled with the acrid smell of burned ozone and scorched rock. The Dominion troops advanced, a relentless tide of discipline and firepower. Anytime now, Naya, Thane shouted, the pressure mounting. Got it, Naya replied triumphantly, her voice cutting through the chaos. Zepha, do the thing. Zepha grinned, her form flickering with digital excitement. She tapped into the Dominion system, unleashing a cascade of false readings and sensor glitches. The Dominion troops hesitated, their advance faltering in confusion. Now, Thane yelled, and the crew made their move. Cody tossed a grenade into the midst of the enemy, a blinding flash and deafening boom echoing through the cavern. Party's over, boys. They ran, the stolen tech clutched to their chests like prized loot. Behind them, the Dominion writhed in disarray, struggling against the chaos Zepha had sown. Keep moving, Thane urged, his breath ragged. We can't let up. They navigated the labyrinthine passages, the rust bucket's familiar shape appearing like the beacon of salvation it wasn't. They piled inside, the ship's systems whirring to life. Punch it, Zepha, Thane ordered, sliding into the captain's chair. Zepha didn't need to be told twice. Her holographic hands flew across the controls, and the rust bucket roared into motion, leaving the asteroid and its Dominion occupants in a trail of stardust. As they cleared the asteroid's gravitational pull, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. "Did we do it?" Cody asked, slumping into his seat. Zephyr grinned, her eyes sparkling with digital mirth. "We did it. The FTL band device is down. Earth's back in the game." A cheer went up, the crew's jubilation a stark contrast to the bleakness of their surroundings. Thane allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Well done, everyone," he said, his voice gruff but warm. "Now let's get the hell out of here before the Dominion realizes they've been played." As the rust bucket soared through the vast expanse of space, the crew settled back into their seats, the weight of their success finally sinking in. "Guess we're heroes now," Naya said, her tone as dry as the void outside. "Not sure about heroes," Thane replied, "but we're definitely not dead. And in this universe that counts for something." "Yeah," Cody added, a weary grin stretching across his face. "Alive and still broke, but hey, that's life on the rust bucket." Zephyr's holographic form floated beside Thane, her expression one of quiet pride. "Captain, I think we just made history." Thane chuckled, shaking his head. "History, huh? Well, let's hope it doesn't end up in the Galactic Dominion's most wanted archives." As they rocketed away from the asteroid, the grim reality of their situation remained. But for now, they'd won a victory, however small it might be. And sometimes, in a universe that seemed hell-bent on grinding you down, that was enough. "What's next, Captain?" Naya asked, her datapad still in her hand, ever ready. Thane leaned back, a thoughtful look in his eyes. "Next, we find Grizz, we refuel, and we figure out how to leverage this little victory into something bigger. And who knows, maybe we'll get lucky." Cody snorted. "Lucky, us? That's a laugh." "Luck is for gamblers," Thane replied, his voice firm. "We've got something better, a crew that doesn't know when to quit." With the Dominion reeling and FTL travel restored, the possibilities stretched out before them like the stars themselves. The path was uncertain, fraught with danger and deception. But with the rust bucket and its ragtag crew, Thane knew they'd face whatever came next together. And for the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem quite so bleak. The rust bucket hummed as it sailed through the black sea of space, its patched hull a testament to defiance against the cosmos' persistent efforts to tear it apart. The crew lounged in various states of exhaustion and exhilaration, the adrenaline high from their recent escapade slowly ebbing away. "Well, that was fun," Cody remarked, stretching out like a cat claiming its territory. "In the way that stabbing yourself in the eye with a fork is fun." Naya chuckled, her eyes still glued to her datapad. "Hey, at least we didn't die. That's always a bonus in our line of work." "Speak for yourself," Thane grumbled, rubbing his temples. His migraine was setting up camp, and it didn't seem inclined to leave anytime soon. "I've got a headache that could kill a small planet." Zephyr's holographic form shimmered into the room, her digital eyes scanning the crew. "You humans really have a knack for survival. It's almost like you're allergic to staying dead." "That's us," Thane replied, his voice laced with dry amusement. "More lives than a cat with a gambling problem." The ship's comm system crackled to life, a static-ridden voice cutting through the rust bucket's ambient noise. "This is Grizz. About time you picked up." "Grizz," Thane's face lit up, a rare sight akin to seeing a politician pass on a bribe. "Where the hell have you been?" "Astrolith," Grizz replied, as if that explained everything. "Been holding our spot at Nexus Tavern. They finally got a new synthale that doesn't taste like engine lubricant." "That's a miracle in itself," Cody quipped. "What's the catch?" "Well," Grizz sighed, "I may have also accidentally started a small bar brawl, but nothing too dramatic." "Typical," Naya said, shaking her head with an affectionate smile. "Couldn't leave you alone for 5 minutes, could we?" "Hey, I like to think of it as keeping things interesting," Grizz replied, a hint of mischief in his voice. "So, what's the plan now that we're heroes and all?" Thane leaned back in his chair, staring at the stars streaking past. "We refuel, restock, and maybe, just maybe, enjoy being the galaxy's most wanted for a little while." "Sounds like a laugh," Grizz said. You know, if being on the run and constantly looking over our shoulders is your idea of fun, it beats being dead, Zephyr chimed in. And besides, we're not exactly the Dominion's favorite people right now. Might as well lean into it. The crew shared a collective chuckle, their camaraderie as vital as the oxygen circulating through the rust bucket's vents. They'd been through hell and worse together, and if there was one thing they knew, it was how to survive. "So, Captain," Naya said, tossing her datapad onto the table, "what's next on our grand adventure?" Thane tapped his chin thoughtfully, the dull throb of his headache serving as an annoying metronome. "Well, now that Earth can zip around the galaxy at light speed again, there's bound to be opportunities. We just need to find the right one. And by right one, you mean the one that pays the most without getting us killed," Cody added helpfully. "Exactly," Thane replied with a smirk. "Let's face it, we're not exactly swimming in credits here, and the rust bucket's not getting any younger." "Tell me about it," Zephyr said, her holographic form flickering. "I'm one short circuit away from a total systems meltdown." "Then it's settled," Thane declared, a spark of determination in his eyes. "We use this victory to secure our future. We've got skills the galaxy needs, and we're not above using them." "Sounds like a plan," Naya agreed, her mind already racing with possibilities. She had a knack for turning chaos into opportunity, and this was no different. "Plus, if things go south, we can always fall back on our charm and good looks," Cody said with a wink. "In that case, we're doomed," Zephyr shot back, her tone dripping with sarcasm. The crew shared a laugh, the kind that only comes from shared danger and hard-won camaraderie. They were an odd assortment, each with their own quirks and flaws, but together they were a force to be reckoned with. As the rust bucket continued its journey through the void, Thane allowed himself a moment of reflection. They'd accomplished what many had thought impossible, and while the road ahead was uncertain, they faced it together. "Here's to not dying today," Thane said, raising an imaginary glass. "And to doing it all again tomorrow," Cody added, clinking his invisible cup against Thane's. The crew joined in, their voices melding into a single toast that echoed through the rust bucket's battered hull. "To the next adventure," Naya said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "And to finding a way to pay for it," Zephyr reminded them, ever the realist. They laughed again, the sound carrying through the ship like a bomb against the universe's harshness. In a galaxy that often seemed determined to grind them into stardust, they'd found their own kind of freedom. "So, Grizz," Thane said, shifting the conversation back to their missing comrade, "what do you say we pick you up and make some poor decisions together?" "Wouldn't have it any other way, Captain," Grizz replied, his voice full of warmth. "I'll hold the fort until then." With Earth's FTL ban broken, the galaxy was their playground. The possibilities were endless, stretching out before them like the star-studded expanse they called home. As the rust bucket hurtled through space, the crew settled into a comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts. They'd faced death and come out the other side, and while the future was as uncertain as ever, they faced it with a sense of optimism that was rare in their line of work. "Hey, Zephyr," Cody called, breaking the silence. "Think we could swing by a refueling station that doesn't look like it's about to collapse in on itself?" "I'll see what I can do," Zephyr replied, her holographic form already working through calculations. "But no promises. The universe isn't exactly known for its hospitality." "Figures," Cody said with a resigned grin. "The things we do for a full tank and a hot meal. Speaking of which," Thane said, turning to Naya, "any chance you can whip up something edible from the rations we've got left?" Naya raised an eyebrow, her expression one of mock affront. "You doubt my culinary genius, Captain?" "I wouldn't dare," Thane replied, his tone as dry as the desert planets they'd visited. "Just hoping for something that doesn't taste like recycled air." "You're in luck," Naya said, pulling out a container filled with a dubious-looking stew. "Today's special, whatever's left stew." "Sounds delicious," Cody said, eyeing the container with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Desperate times, desperate measures," Zephyr commented, her holographic face twisting into a smirk. "Bon appetit." As the crew dug into their meal, the conversation turned to lighter topics, their banter a welcome distraction from the challenges ahead. They were weary and battered, but they'd survived. And in a universe as unforgiving as theirs, that was no small feat. "So, Thane," Cody said between bites, "you ever think about what you'd be doing if you weren't out here, dodging Dominion patrols and eating mystery stew?" Thane considered the question, a smile playing on his lips. "I don't know. Probably something boring like accounting or planetary insurance." "Yeah, because you scream desk job to me," Naya joked, rolling her eyes. "Hey, everyone's got a secret dream," Thane replied with a shrug. "Mine just happens to involve fewer explosions. Can't say I blame you," Grizz's voice cut in over the comms. "But let's face it, you'd be bored out of your skull." Thane chuckled, conceding the point. "Maybe, but at least my head wouldn't be pounding like a bass drum." "Small victories," Zephyr said softly, her words carrying a weight that belied her digital form. The crew lapsed into a comfortable silence once more, the only sound the quiet hum of the Rustbucket's engines as it carried them toward their next destination. "To the next adventure," Thane whispered, his voice barely audible over the ship's mechanical symphony. "And to whatever comes next," Naya added, her eyes fixed on the stars outside. The crew of the Rustbucket had faced near-impossible odds and emerged victorious. Their journey was far from over, and the universe had plenty more challenges in store for them. But they'd found strength in each other, a bond forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by humor and resilience. As the stars streaked past, Thane knew that whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together. And for them, there was no better way to live. In the vast, indifferent expanse of space, they had each other. And sometimes, that was the greatest treasure of all.